Hello and welcome to Sonic Bytes, the freewheeling conversation and interview series for the eclectic music lover. This week we jump forward to the 1980s with Bath-based synth-pop bastions Tears for Fears and their iconic album Songs from the Big Chair. From the musical virtuosity of Head Over Heels and The Working Hour to the iconic drum loops, synth lines and production of Shout and Everybody Wants to Rule the World, we discuss politics, the 1980s sound and the amount of music per square inch in various musical genres. We also talk about the different invasions of British artists into the American charts and whether a third invasion is imminent, a long way away, or may have already happened. We also pay our tributes to the wonderful talents of Chadwick Boseman, who tragically passed away after a long battle with cancer the morning we filmed this episode. As always, if you're enjoying the podcast, it would mean the absolute world to us if you could follow us on Spotify, Apple or Stitcher, subscribe to the YouTube channel, drop a like, leave a comment, as it goes a long way to helping support the show and allowing us to make more freewheeling content. We hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I wanted to start off the call just to, we're recording this on the morning that we've heard the news that Chadwick Boseman unfortunately passed away due to cancer. Overnight in the UK. And yeah, I just wanted to talk a bit about it just because it's on our minds. And it's something like he's an actor that's been, we've been a big fan of, the both of us. And we've shared a lot of memories together from his acting career and experiencing him on the screen. And yeah, it's just really saddening to hear that and to know that he was like battling cancer all those years, that that we were watching and experiencing those films, and he was acting in them, and acting is absolute hard out. I mean, it's not completely totally music related, but yeah, I mean, he was in Get On Up, which is my first experience with his acting and his performance, and it's personally one of my favorite performances of all time of just someone on a screen, just on a very, very personal level rather than on the greatest of all list level.
No, I feel exactly the same way. Get On Up's one of my favorite films to watch. And as we've been quoting it for years, ever since we saw it together. The whole sort of does it? you cheersing the Marvel thing as well, because obviously. From the Black Panther film that we watched as well, but yeah, no, he's to give so much of like a physical performance in so many of his films as well, like in Civil War and Black Panther, like just the amount of physicality that you have to, the shape that you have to get into to perform at that level, while battling cancer at the same time is absolutely amazing. And even in Get On Up as well, the fact that like he was, such an amazing singer, such an amazing dancer as well, and such a great performer, is mind blowing to think that he was battling cancer that whole time and chose not to tell anyone and chose to sort of keep it to himself, or at least to close friends and family, and not to let the world, like the whole of the world, sort of see that. To me it's utterly heroic, really, and obviously utterly heartbreaking that he's sadly passed away as well.
Yeah, it was like all those scenes that we've both experienced. We watched Get On Up together. We watched all the MCU films together as fans, like going to the premieres or like the midnight screenings.
Yeah, exactly.
We watched Civil War together, and that was when he first was introduced as Black Panther, and then we watched Black Panther together as well, and obviously all the Avengers films
and Infinity War and Endgame as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to rewatch them just to there was so much more weight to those scenes now,
knowing that what he was going through. Yeah, exactly. I feel we should have a Chadwick Boseman marathon at some point soon. Just all of our just to rewatch all of our favorite films, and just fully appreciate the amazing talent that was that is and was Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, he means a lot to us, but I think he also means way more than we can imagine to sort of like Black communities and people of color, to see them represented on the big screen at Hollywood, whatever that means, there's in all those ways.
Absolutely, and to friends and family and people who knew him as well. Obviously he'll mean more to those people than we can ever imagine. But just as as fans from afar, he's responsible for so many of our, so many of the highlights in our friendship, watching films together, as we've done over the years. And so, yeah, like I'd like to thank him, I guess, for all the wonderful memories that he's given me and given us as well, as friends. And if my condolences can reach, anyone who's also a fan, or can reach any further than this, my utter heartfelt condolences to everyone who knew him, because to me at least he was an absolutely amazing individual, an amazing actor, an amazing musician, an amazing performer, and he'll be sorely missed by me at least.
Yeah, and for me personally, like as a person of Asian descent, I feel like the studio, especially one of the biggest studios in the world, Disney and Marvel, to be taking a chance on something like Shang-Chi, and more representing people of Asian descent in the future, it wouldn't have come about. It wouldn't be taking those gambles without Black Panther blazing the way.
The cult film it was.
Yeah, and obviously Black Panther isn't just Chadwick Boseman; it's everyone that works on that film. It was,
Ryan Coogler, the director. Yeah, Kendrick Lamar, the producer of the music and everything.
Yeah, and the entire cast, the entire crew, and so just thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to get that out there, in the world. I think this
definitely
is a nice way to do that rather than just another post.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chadwick Boseman. We will miss you very, very much.
Yeah. Anyway, how do we even transition from there to what we want to talk about?
A seamless segue from, there are many synths used in the Black Panther film, and the album that we're going to talk about is one of the quintessential synth albums of the 1980s. Wow. Songs from the Big Chair by Tears for Fears. Seamless.
Yeah, I was actually rewatching a lot of his SNL clips when he was on SNL right after Black Panther.
Oh, like Black Jeopardy and stuff.
Yeah, and he does do quite he's not. I don't think he's the most natural comedian, but he definitely can do it.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, so it was nice to see clips of him just being in a fun situation as well, and just to remember it wasn't just all serious things.
Yeah. What was the? Can you remember the first the time you saw Chadwick Boseman on screen? Because I think mine was even earlier than Get On Up. I think mine was I think it was an episode of House where he was of all things, he was a soccer player, and he had some sort of disease or something that House obviously cured and solved. But yeah, it was just no, that's completely wrong. It was Lie to Me with Tim Roth, where he's a football player and he has this alleged relationship, a girl accuses him of having a relationship with her, and she's underage, and it turns out that it's not the case, and he's telling the truth. But that was the first time I saw Chadwick Boseman, and then your brain sort of does a little sort of he was in when I saw him in Black Panther and Civil War, and I was like So yeah, all the way back in 2000 and something, I saw Chadwick Boseman. So been a fan ever since OG days when he was in Lie to Me.
Yeah, we'll have to add that to the marathon then.
Definitely, just the one episode of Lie to Me where he's in there as well.
I mean, I guess the segue could be just the fact that, I think we associate a lot of music as well with music that is in films. Say with Chadwick Boseman's films, you think of the incredible soundtrack to Black Panther, you think of Get On Up. I need to watch. I mean, honestly, I feel like I really want to.
We need to rewatch Get On Up.
Yeah, and we need to. I really want to watch a lot of his other films, but I mean, today we I kind of want to talk to you about Tears for Fears. I mean that's what we planned the show to do. We just wanted to talk about Chadwick for a bit first, but I mean, this is an album that I never really got around to that early. I know you've been a Tears for Fears fan forever, and you're one of the. I mean, I only found out about Tears for Fears, when I think they did a gig in Hong Kong, ages ago, maybe 10 years ago, when I was still living in Hong Kong. And I was like, oh, this is just another band that's kind of cheesy that's coming to Hong Kong. And I sort of filed that away. It's okay, Tears for Fears came to Hong Kong. Maybe I'll check them out one day. And then you started talking about it once I met you. And it's only really recently that we've planned to do this episode that I've really dug into that album. And it's been it's been a journey, but I mean also like Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I guess that's one of the most synced songs. Like, well, not most synced, but maybe like
it's
iconically
used in a heck of a lot of films, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the most recent one I can remember is even just in like the recent Transformers film, Bumblebee.
Oh yeah, and Bumblebee, of course.
Yeah, there's like a scene where they're driving along this random coast, and it's like,
and it's in Donnie Darko as well, isn't it? I think, which the film with Jake Gyllenhaal, back from 1990 something. But I think like at some point in your life, you have to drive down a motorway or down a highway like with the window open and blare out Everybody Wants to Rule the World. It's just like one of the bucket list like things you have to do. It's that song, like it's the song to drive like with the windows open, like if you have like an open top tire with it cut down and just drive with the sun shining and everything, like it's that, like to me at least, like it's that song that you do that with.
We got to write the book, the 1001 songs that you must listen to before you die while driving along the coast of Malibu, like
exactly.
Like, specifically.
So what? So as you said, like you've come to Tears for Fears a bit more recently than I have.
Yeah. How did you come across them?
Oh, my parents. It wasn't even optional. I didn't really like. I've grown up listening to Tears for Fears. I can't remember the first time hearing songs from The Big Chair or The Hurting. Like my parents have been fans. Like, I mean, my parents were both born in 1964, so they would have been 21 when. When Songs from The Big Chair came out, so they were our age when they were experiencing sort of the Tears for Fears thing. So they were the OG experiencers of Tears for Fears, and they sort of passed it on to me. So like I remember singing along to the Tears for Fears like lyrics before I knew what the lyrics were, if that makes sense. Just like before you can like your brain can like register lyrics, sort of like just singing like gobbledygook like lyrics along to them. That's how long I've been a fan of Tears for Fears. It's just sort of been part of my musical DNA and stuff. But like what did you think of the album then? Because obviously like I find it a lot harder to kind of contextualize it in the same way, whereas like listening to it as somebody who's come to it more recently, like what were your kind of takeaways from it?
Well, I think, I mean, firstly I gravitated towards the production and also the arrangements of the songs. I tend to like lyrics are not that I don't take them into account, but they're definitely like I have to take in the music and the vibe first before I can dig into the lyrics. Whereas for a lot of songs, I think some people just listen to the lyrics straight away. But maybe that's just because I'm a musician and I listen out for that type of thing first, as a visceral thing. Yeah. It's an absolute classic. The production is still pristine. Maybe I'm listening to a remastered version of it because it was produced in the 80s. But yeah, just the arrangements, the sort of the key signatures that it's like going through, the fact that it plays like a full album, and there are bangers, and then they're not filler tracks, but they're definitely like I feel like they're linking tracks almost,
like sizzlers.
Yeah, it's like you have shouts
and then like.
Yeah, you have Shout, you have Everybody Wants to Rule the World, you have Head Over Heels. I mean, you have other bangers as well. You have Working Hour and Mother's Talk as well. And also, what the last song is. I don't remember.
Oh, Listen.
Listen, that's the one. But but it's... I was just wowed by... It touched a lot of different emotional strains for me in terms of... obviously, Everybody Wants to Rule the World lifts you into another dimension. It almost sounds, for me, it doesn't sound British at all. It sounds very American. Maybe it's because we associate it with Hollywood films or something like that. I can't exactly pin it down, but I
wonder whether it's like the sort of, because obviously the riff itself has that kind of like Lydian vibe. It's got that sort of like it's kind of like. So it's got that sort of like, and like that's used in a lot of, I notice it in a lot of American films in the 90s. They have that kind of like Lydian vibe, and it has that sort of unresolved, sort of not quite ethereal, but kind of like it's just above the real
Yeah.
world and reality sort of thing, and it just floats just above. It's not sort of like all the way up into sort of spiritual and gospel stuff, but it just sort of floats there, and it kind of just transports you, as you said, like just to a slightly like higher plane of existence.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like it's like a bunch of dudes from Bath, England, like making it. Like, sure, maybe you can drive along the like Cornwall and blast it out and like around that Devon area, and it'll be nice,
Exactly.
But it's
Just like zoom down the M5 and just like listen to Tears for Fears.
Yeah, but also I think with the case with one of my, I think probably my favorite track on the album, Head Over Heels, and transitioning it from, it's almost sandwiched by the song Broken,
Yes.
in terms of the track listing. That sort of hit, like the riff felt very sort of, it's heavy, but it's like, it's also like very driving. So it's almost, it's evocative of that era of music in the 80s where you have synths coming up, but you still have remnants of like guitar. Like,
Yes.
like a lot of it, like there's this like, that overdriven guitar sound is very like sort of hard rock metal-ish. And the riff was very like, that type of minor pentatonic sort of thing. And yeah,
They're,
because I mean,
I was going to say that they're obviously. I agree with absolutely all of that. Like, the rhythms are fantastic. I think the fact that they use a Linn drum on a lot of the tracks really shines through, and the fact that the drum beats themselves are, a lot of them they loop through the entire song, like shout that ding 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 ding, like it goes through the entire song, but like it's so iconic that you can't help, like it's the drum beats are very, I don't know whether they're meticulously planned, but like because the drum beats are so iconic, sort of it really drives the album forwards, I think. And the same with the Working Hours, same with all of the songs, like the drum beats themselves, and obviously Everybody Wants to Roll the World, that iconic like dun dun ga dun dun ga, like it's just it's absolutely fantastic. I think, but aside from that, they are both absolutely fantastic musicians as well. Like Roland Orzabal, so the guy who plays guitar on most of the songs, he is a fantastic guitar player, and extremely underrated as well. In terms of like, it's not what obviously the band is known for being like not a synth pop band, more of a new wave kind of band, but like they're not known for guitar virtuosity, but he's a fantastic guitar player. And Kurt Smith, the other guy, he's the guy who plays bass on it as well, and he's like some of the bass riffs in it, like at the end of at the end of a Head Over Heels, like when you go back into Broken. Just like the bass riffs are, it's fantastic bass playing. Like it's just
it was. I was watching
really
a clip
slaps.
of them like performing it on. I think they released a DVD or not DVD, whatever video format it was back then. Like straight after Songs from the Big Chair came out. Yeah, and I think it's called,
VHS,
and I think it's called Songs from the Big Seat or something like that. It's some
scenes from the Big Chair.
Scenes from the Big Chair, something like that. Yeah, that. But he's playing like a Steinberger bass, and it's like it's the one with like the headless stock on it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, dude, that's so like it's just so sort of synth poppy, you feel like you want to watch like Level 42 sort of playing that type of thing. And also the guitar parts, they're so diverse on the album. There's a lot of overdriven parts that feel like almost like fusion 80s glam rock sort of thing, but then you also have those cheesy guitar like chorusy things. I think he's playing like, you can actually see him playing a Roland jazz chorus guitar amp on the stage. But none of the parts also feel like they're like indulgent or anything. It just like whatever we classify as cheesy, they just did it there,
It's so like, it's kind of, it's weird because the instrumentation and the parts are kind of, they're all, a lot of them, to me at least, if you break them down, they're sort of like the weird like piano voice, like the piano like voices you get if you sort of go to like number 600 on your keyboard that you have at home. Sort of you come across like the Tears for Fears sounds, but they're used in such an interesting and sort of innovative way that like they're actually really cool when you hear them.
Yeah.
Sort of like using like what are they you know, like synth trumpet noises and things like that. Like by themselves, when you hear them, it's sort of like when you're noodling around, it's sort of like, oh no, not that sound again. But then like it's used in a hit song in Everybody Wants to Rule the World, for example. You know,
it's
like the pan pipe that they. Yeah, like
it's
the
like
pan
a good
pipe
fusion of those things, you know. Whereas their first album was very like synth driven, like the album with Mad World and the Heard thing. But there was, I feel like it was a good combination. It wasn't fully synth, it wasn't fully guitar. Obviously they were influenced a lot by Depeche Mode, I think. Happened just before them. I think they were also citing like Talking Heads influence. I've recently gone around to listening to all of Talking Heads discography, and you can really feel those things were happening at the same time, you know, even if Talking Heads was much less synthy than Tears for Fears, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing that I really love about this album, like having listened to it before I played any music, and now playing, you know, music for a living, is like how much music per square inch there is on this album. The fact that if you listen to something like Head Over Heels, for example, there are so many different riffs that interweave with each other absolutely perfectly, and every single part that's played, the piano, the guitar, the bass, they all have, and the strings, the drums, they all have their own part, and it sort of it interweaves and it sits perfectly with all the other parts as well. And it's like, to me, that's really sort of, it's like hard working composition, if that makes sense. Kind of like not settling and going like, oh, okay, we have an electric guitar in here, so like, and it's overdriven, okay, we need some power chords kind of thing, or just, you know, or it just, you know, play something. Like every part seems to me at least to be really meticulously planned to fit with all the other parts, and as a result, to me, it's really interesting to listen to as well, because you can listen out and you can listen to the track multiple times and you can appreciate every single instrument, the way it's played on each time through. And so there's something, and
for something
discovery.
So popular to you know, something that's so like widely appreciated, to have that type of sophistication is like you see why some people say they miss old music and the way
no, definitely. I think like I think I remember John Mayer talking about this sort of thing, like growing up in the 80s and there being so much music per square inch, like so much music for your music, you know. And I think this album kind of like it as you said, it touches on, obviously draws from the sort of synth pop idea from sort of things like the Human League and Aha, but it also draws heavily from the glam rock stuff. And I think there are every now and again you have those sort of musical convergences where one thing's on the way out and something else is on the way in, and you get a really amazing mix of the two. And like, you know, Tears for Fears kind of crystallizes that in the 80s, but it's similar to like Motown in the 60s as well, where sort of more electronic music was coming in, but horns and strings were still sort of, and classical stuff was on the way out. And so then they met in the middle, and you have these amazing compositions where you have a mixture of both, and sort of the two genres meld together, and you get these absolutely iconic tracks. And it's you know, exactly the same with Tears for Fears in the 80s as well. Like it's so iconic, and it's weird, isn't it? Because it's so iconic, but it's so 80s as well. Like the use of synths, the use of like gated snare on like all of the tracks, like it just it sticks a timestamp on it when you hear it. It's just like it's so 80s, but like in the best possible way of the 80s, if that makes sense. Like
there's a great video that Rick Beato put out, is part of his amazing
What Makes This Song Great series.
What Makes a Song Great, and he breaks down head over heels, and he's somehow, I don't know how he does it, but he just is able to get all these like those stems from these classic tracks from ages ago that were probably recorded on tape, and he just has them on his laptop and just like, oh, here's like this random part that's like buried in the mix, and lifts the entire track, and you're like, oh. And
apparently that he that's what like the money that he gets for the videos goes for. Like he uses it
just
to like
buying the stems,
like like to like fly to the record labels and ask like, can I please have the stems for this song, because I want to do a video on it, and it's going to get loads of views and it's going to help promote the song, kind of thing.
What a hero.
Yeah,
I think he's even currently like battling a court case in the US where he's trying to sort of against the sort of the copyright strike system on YouTube, because a lot of his videos are being taken down. and there's like a massive legal case that he's almost updating his listeners about at the same time. So it's
I love it. I love it so much. Like just watching him rant for like half an hour on how like because it depends on the artist basically. Like some artists he calls them like blockers. Where they won't give up the stems, or it might not even be the artist, but the record company the artist is signed to. If any copyrighted material is used from that artist, they'll basically demonetize the video straight away, or they'll take it down. And his argument is go on, sorry,
because he did an amazing video recently of it's just basically him and a guitar, and he titled the video like are there still any original hooks left to be written? And he starts playing all these tracks of those so-called blocker artists, but just him singing along really badly to them. So he's like, oh, here's like Beatles songs like "Love, Love Me Do," and he goes on to the Rolling Stones. He goes on to like the Eagles and AC/DC and all these like notorious blocking bands. And it's just a night like. That video is just a massive troll because it's just going to be
just a great like middle finger to all the people who blocked him. Yeah. I remember I remember watching John Mayer do something similar where he was like taking the mickey out of like covering songs and sort of like doing melodies and stuff, and he was saying like, well, we can't sing Billie Jean like in a carpool karaoke or something like that. Sure. But he said, but if you change the melody just enough, you can get away with it, kind of thing. So like, she told me her name was Billie Jean and she caused a scene. And it's just like, you pick like one note and just drag it somewhere else.
That's our John Mayer bomb of the somehow managed to get him into Tears for Fears.
Snuck him in there.
He's I feel like we have to do an episode on John Mayer like soon. It's coming, you know.
It's coming.
Like, if you know us at all, you know that we can just talk about John Mayer. We could probably make an entire podcast about John Mayer.
We could make a series about John Mayer, yeah.
But the episode is coming. But let us know if you want it. It's on its way.
We'll do like a supercut of all the like the shoehorn John Mayer references that have come.
And that would be the episode. That would be the John Mayer episode.
Like even out of the like 8 episodes we've done so far, that'll be like, you know, at least 30 minutes long of just all the times we're like, oh, and John Mayer said this thing, and I'm just like, oh, here we go again.
Yeah, but I think you mentioned earlier about like stuff like the Human League and Aha and all those hits from the 80s, and I think so I guess Tears for Fears were part of that second British invasion, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I mean, it is called that, but it's kind of I find it quite interesting that you can actually like pinpoint like the first British invasion of music, and then the second one is just kind of I find that quite amusing. I'm not sure why we're using like these sort of war analogies to talk about the way music proliferates in the United States. But I guess Tears for Fears were a big part of that. Like Everybody Wants to Rule the World was a big hit in the US, you know.
Definitely. I think, I mean, the wording is interesting. I guess like the whole, because obviously you have like America has never been sort of invaded in the same way as, you know, like France or Germany or Britain has. It's like, you know, just to sail over is kind of like, is a very difficult thing to do. So I guess the fact that it was a musical invasion sort of speaks to that, I guess, perhaps.
I guess it's quite interesting as well because of the context of where this album was coming out. Like, I mean, you're the historian here, but in terms of like the Cold War and the tensions, and I think Everybody Wants to Rule the World used to be like its original title was called Everybody Wants to Go to War, and which does make sense in terms you can sing it, you know, but they changed it to be maybe a bit more. Like, I guess Rule the World is a bit more encompassing, you know. It's like, it's less
exactly.
It's specifically to do with war, but, you know, it's still, you can still attribute it, you know.
I watched them, they did, I think Spotify, they did a Tears for Fears concert on YouTube, and he was talking about that, and he was sort of like, we actually called it Everybody Wants to, he's got that sort of like bar, like, we actually called it Everybody Wants to Go to War, and he was like, yeah, and, you know, just, and so they changed it, basically.
He's got such a, like a, what's the word for it? Is it guttural? Or it's like the way he talks like this, you know? It's like, or is it just
it's just, I guess it's just the accent from Bath, I suppose. I do find it so, I find it really weird, and this might be why, you know, UK music gets so far in America, is that a lot of very famous UK artists sing with an American accent. and it always seems really strange. And I think I don't know whether you might not have this as much as I do, but like because of the kind of the fact that, you know, and I sing with an American accent as well when I sing my stuff, that like when you stop singing and you stop performing, artists, they talk with a British accent again. You know, so you have Tears for Fears and Roland Dorsabal, and then he starts talking with a Bath accent, and then it means that when I hear American accents in real life, I feel like they're acting, and like they're gonna, like, and you hear it in movies as well, and you hear it in films, so then like I always think that like as soon as you meet that person in real life, they'll be like, oh yeah, no, nice to meet you, my name's Robert Downey Jr. kind of thing. And they're just talk with a British accent. It's obviously not the case, but I think that might be one of the reasons that UK music, aside from obviously being fantastically written, produced, recorded, and there's the actual just the technical virtuosity of the playing as well. The reason it's so palatable in America is because you're singing with an accent that Americans recognize.
Yeah, and I was reading somewhere as well this week about how like British music, like this British invasion, they were also incorporating a lot of like African American music influences into their like the rhythms and the soul of a lot of like Black American music and culture into their British music, you know, whatever that means, and that helped it also popularize it, you know, and it owes a great depth to, I think, a lot of music as well. It owes a great debt to Black music and Black culture, and the same way that maybe like Michael McDonald, when he sings soul, like when he sings his brand of soul music, it owes like a massive, you know, that's it. Like the music he's singing really originates from that type of culture. So all these, it's like a massive melting pot that resulted in the popularization of some British artists in the US, you know.
Yeah, I definitely say that's definitely the case in the 1960s, because obviously if you think back to the 1960s, you have the whole civil rights movement, you have the whole issue of radio stations not playing, you know, Black music because they say, oh, you know, the majority of the people listening to us are white listeners, so we want to play music that they want to hear. And so people like, you know, even people like who nowadays are, you know, world-renowned, B.B. King, Buddy Guy, you know, Muddy Waters, they weren't getting played on white radio stations. Even Chuck Berry, his name is not Chuck Berry, but he had to change his name to Chuck Berry so that it would get played, because white audio, it basically flew under the radar of people picking it up and sort of hearing it and going and thinking that, you know, Chuck Berry is a white sounding name, and so they played him on radio. And so I think
even like the blues influence on the Beatles, and the fact that was a massive part of their sound.
That was all B.B. King, Muddy Waters, T-Bone Walker, all these guys. But I think one of the reasons that they were so popular in America was because they essentially introduced America to its own music. You know, white guys playing Black music, and people are like, oh, this is absolutely fantastic. You know, where's this come from? And then them turning around and go, no, it's from Bath. Your country. You know, it's from, well, no, originally it's obviously, you know, it's from,
it's being made,
it's from, you know, the Deep South and, you know, from Black artists. And so I think that was one of the reasons that it got so popular in America, because it was their own music that they were then hearing for the first time, obviously through white people singing it. Like, was it John Lennon when he came over and they asked him, oh, like, what's the first thing you're going to do when you get over here? And he said, oh, I'm going to go and see Muddy Waters. And the guy went, oh, where's that? And he didn't even know who Muddy Waters was. And it's kind of like, it's just mind blowing to think that someone as iconic as Muddy Waters wasn't known in America, but made it over to Britain with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, you know, all these guys who popularized that music and then brought it back over again. You know, it's absolutely fantastic. The second wave, I guess, less so than that, because obviously by that point, you know, Black music had become really popular in America. But I think what's interesting with the whole Tears for Fears thing, historically at least, is that compared to The Hurting, which they said themselves is a very introspective, sort of inward-looking album about childhood fears and sort of they were quite into psychology at the time and sort of philosophy. They were doing a lot of reading. I can't remember the philosopher they read, but even the name of the band, Tears for Fears, comes from the philosophy of letting children cry, as opposed to sort of staying quiet and being afraid of things. So literally trading your tears for fears. And so that was where the name of the band came from.
Sure.
And that was the first album. It was very introspective, inward looking, you know, The Hurting, Memories Fade, I'm trying to think of the other. Advice for the Young at Heart is that's one of my favourite Tears for Fears songs. It's absolutely amazing. But with Songs from the Big Chair, they decided to flip it and they started looking outwards and they started talking about things that were going on in the world. And so if you think about sort of the historical context of 1985, sort of the Cold War is still raging on. America versus, Reagan versus Gorbachev, and everything going on there, and the protests against nuclear weapons. It's anti-war songs. Shout, as you said yourself, is a protest song. Let it all out. These are the things I can do without.
Oh, damn, I was going to say.
Sorry, yeah.
You said it. You shouted it first.
Shouted it first.
Yeah. And that became like a massive hit straight away. It was just apparently.
Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't alive.
No, me. 10 years before our time, or 9 years before yours, because you were born in just under a month before me, but in a different year. But yeah, I think when songs have the ability to do that, and that they strike a nerve of a certain time, where they just capture the feeling of a certain of a generation, of a portion of a population. I think they have the ability to then have that sort of worldwide appeal. So like Shout, everybody wants to rule the world. Like it's such a catchy, pithy line, but in a way, like it's so true as well. That kind of like everybody wants to rule the world, that deep down everyone probably does. Which I think is an absolute, and to be able to crystallize it in such a catchy phrase with so few words. Everybody wants to rule the, like, it's 6 words, but it's like it speaks to so much more than that.
And I think it's quite interesting, because I feel like this type of music, like this sort of like synthy led music with just the way the 80s aesthetic was, I think a lot of people do dismiss it as very cheesy. I'm sure if you were living in the 80s at the time, if you were like, obviously Tears for Fears are very, very much like loved by a lot of people, but I think a lot of people might also consider them as like a bit too cheesy, or a bit too like I guess bubblegum for the time, like even though there's so much to unpack and there's so much historical context, especially if you're just like a rock purist, then you feel like maybe the synths were replacing the guitars as like the lead thing, and so because there's so much to unpack, it's sad that some people would just dismiss it. But at the same time, obviously, music, like everyone is entitled to their opinion about music. But like it's a shame that some people will miss out on this type of stuff. I mean, if it's not your cup of tea, it's not your cup of tea. But
I think I see what you mean. I think there is definitely that that aesthetic that hearing it now, I think it's tricky, isn't it? Because I would argue it's I mean, in my opinion, it's some of the best music of the 80s. It's kind of like, if synth pop is a genre, sort of people like Tears for Fears and a-ha and the Human League, like they're right at the top of it. But I think because of synth pop as a genre and people sort of understanding kind of like what, like the tropes of synth pop, I suppose, sort of the sound of it, like there is a lot of music, a lot of synth pop music that isn't, like personally, I would say like as good as Tears for Fears and the Human League and a-ha and people like that. Like with the same with most stuff, there's the creme de la creme of pop punk, for example, and then there's the rest of pop punk, and some of it is just not as good as like Blink 182, for example, that really sort of hits it right at the top, and Green Day, and there's sort of the other stuff that kind of is just below it. But obviously that's where the stereotype and the idea of pop punk comes from a lot of the time. And so I think the trope of synth pop itself is a bit cheesy, but I think if you could, like, if you were to listen to Tears for Fears in isolation, like Songs from the Big Chair, for example, like I hope you wouldn't think it is cheesy, like in terms of like, because there obviously there are synths on it, but like as you said, it uses so many other influences as well, like I Believe, for example, like is a piano track mostly, and there's like raging sax solos and things like The Working Hour as well. The whole it's like a 2.5 minute introduction of a 4-minute song of just like sax just being absolutely fantastic. That's another weird thing of like the 1980s. I always think sort of that for some reason, like instead of having guitar solos, kind of like saxophone solos were the thing in a lot of bands, like Billy Joel, for example. Like the amount of saxophone solos on something like The Stranger always really interests me.
Yeah, it's almost like introducing, like, because obviously saxophone was like massive in jazz. So it's almost like it was maybe in the 70s it was took a bit of a backseat, maybe or maybe it's used more for like soul music and in like Motown and funk, and then sort of slowly introduced itself into synth pop, and then it just became this, the cheesy sax that we know and love today.
Yeah, exactly. It's almost like it's
very
almost
much
like
generalizing.
This, it's almost like this album kind of like it's just at the start of that, like before it started to be like overdone and became a meme. It's sort of like this, like, it's the inspiration for a meme. Like the meme that synthpop has kind of become, and sort of like, like using a saxophone solo tastefully in the introduction to a song, whereas obviously like now when you hear a saxophone in synthpop, it's like, right, okay, here we go again, sort of thing.
I think it's also quite interesting that it's sort of running parallel with like prog rock, and also how prog rock was is huge in the 70s, but I think it also in the 80s, like those synths also start coming into prog rock as well, with bands like Rush and all that, and also has it's sort of, I feel like they were both parallel tangents. They were moving at the same velocity but reaching different audiences. Tears for Fears was much more like a pop audience, and then you have the prog rockers who are like in their prog rock, sort of doing their prog rock thing, and it influences sort of like, I think, prog today as well. I think Songs with a Big Chair was remastered by Steven Wilson from the band Porcupine Tree, who are Porcupine Tree.
Right.
Yeah. I think Steven Wilson's also done a lot of remixes and remasters of like stuff like Yes and Genesis and all that type of stuff. And that was in the 80s, and that was also, I guess, is part of the British invasion as well into the US.
Genesis, big time, selling England by the pound.
Yeah, and one parallel I drew with Steven Wilson's music as well is that in Head Over Heels, is it? There's like a time flies, that type of that thing. I forgot what part of the song is, but there's like a huge like time flies sort of thing.
Funny how time flies at the end. The whole like with the weird like synthesized voice and everything at the end.
Yeah, and then Steven Wilson put out a song called Time Flies in 2010 off the album The Incident, which is like a concept album. And so there was like that connection there. I was like, oh, maybe it is a homage to Head Over Heels, or maybe it's not, but it definitely feels like a direct reference. And I think that's that was like the lead single of their album as well. So it was one of the first Porcupine Tree songs I heard. So I thought that's an interesting parallel with prog, with the aesthetic of prog, definitely. The futuristic side of it, at least.
The sort of vibe of it as well, yeah. No, definitely. And that is really interesting, sort of the musical references and things that happen as well. I know that Tears for Fears do a lot of that in their own work too, where you have like that there's a song called Pharaohs that they do. I can't remember which album it's off. I had like the album that I actually grew up listening to was like a greatest hits Tears for Fears album. It was called like hits from the Big Chair or something. Sure. And it had like so it had sort of other songs on there as well.
And they only made a couple albums. Like they only made like 4 or 5 studio albums.
Yeah. They've made more now. They broke up after, I think, in the late 80s, because they decided that they were literally in each other's pockets for sort of like, because they were friends from school. And I think they just spent a bit too much time together, sort of all the time touring and everything, and they were always arguing. So they broke up and they came back together sort of, I think it was in the late 90s or the early 2000s that they brought out some new music, which is definitely worth listening to as well. Less synth poppy, and kind of like it's just, slightly not older music, but obviously like as you're older, your writing perspective will change, and you'll write about things that are important to you, as you get older. And there's one about like Cradle and Grave or something, where they're sort of talking about like having kids and families and things like that. But in Pharaohs, which is a song where it's a really interesting song. Sorry, it's not on Big Chair, but like it's a really interesting, because they use like the lyrics in it is the shipping forecast. Sure. And so like it's literally this guy just reading off the shipping forecast with this like sort of really nice low driving drums and piano, but then they have the solo from Everybody Wants to Rule the World played more slowly, sort of like underneath it, like ever so subtly, and it sort of comes in and you recognize it, and it's like, oh yeah. And so like they reference their own music a lot of the time, which is really cool. Which is, I guess, the advantage of having like concept albums and sort of having your own if you have enough music, you almost create your own, Tears for Fears verse. so to
Yeah.
speak, and then you can sort of like call in other things from the Tears for Fears verse and sort of use it because it's yours, you've written it, and so why not, use it again and again, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm sad to have missed. I think BBC put out a documentary earlier this year as part of their classic album series, where it's like an hour-long documentary, and I'm bummed to have missed it at the time. I think it came out in February 2020, and now because it's a BBC thing, they haven't put it up, or they're gonna rerun it at a later date, so they haven't put it on iPlayer.
Yeah.
But I really want to watch that. I think there's it's just a good quality, high definition, and high quality deep dive into the process of making the album, closely done with the members of the band. So one to bookmark for both us and for the listeners.
Yeah,
in the future.
definitely. As soon as that comes out, we need to watch that together and just have a really good time watching it, because I'd love to. The more I can find out about Tears for Fears, the better, really.
I'm excited to dig more into their discography and the album after as well. I forgot the one with Woman in Chains and Year of the Knife on it. Whatever that one's called.
So it's Sowing the Seeds of Love, isn't it? Oh God, yeah. Sorry, that's just a whole other kettle of fish talking about Sowing the Seeds of Love. Another album that I think my parents had the Hurting, they had Songs from the Big Chair, and they had Sowing the Seeds of Love, and so like over my childhood I listened to all of them just again and again and again. But definitely worth. I would definitely encourage you guys, if you're listening, like if you get a chance to listen to Tears for Fears, like just if you want to have a deep dive, there's so much good music in there to listen to and appreciate.
Yeah. Also, Leo actually did a full one-man band cover of Everybody Wants to Rule the World, complete with like video effects and we haven't even talked about the aesthetic. It's just like the video for Head Over Heels and for Everybody Wants to Rule the World. He's like in his like polo, and also we haven't even touched on the fact that they both sing. Like it's not just one lead singer. Like I think they decided that Kurt was a better singer for Everybody Wants to Rule the World because what are their names again? I've really done my research.
Kurt Smith and Roland Orzabal.
And Roland is the guitarist, right? And Kurt's the bassist. Yeah. So they decided that Kurt was like the better singer for Everybody Wants to Rule the World because he's got a slightly softer voice, I think. But then like in the pre-chorus, every time like Roland comes in and they sing it in unison. It always that always used to like blow my mind as well growing up, like that, and like listening to Simon and Garfunkel and not knowing what harmony was, and like being like what's going like and like just not having like the mental computing power to realize it was two people singing and just being like, how are they doing that? And the same with this, where like I thought it was one guy, and like the way their voices, like, because obviously they come in and out and they sing sort of various bits like together and apart, like I thought it was one guy, and it's like, how is he changing his voice like that much from being like so soft and airy to sort of the really kind of like sort of nasal like bell like tone of Roland Orzabal singing. Used to completely it would just completely blow my mind. Like as a kid, I was just like, what's going on? How are you doing that like with your voice? I guess to wrap up, I think that it might be interesting to just talk about whether, because this British invasion of the US,
it keeps happening, doesn't it? We keep invading.
Yeah, but I'm just curious on whether it will. Like whether you can classify it again in such a globalized world, whatever. That's a very general statement, but in an ever-connected world where the US and the UK are like it's you don't really want to differentiate it as like there is British music and there is American music, and they draw from each other a lot. But whether we will ever be able to classify a third British invasion? Has that happened already? Or
that's a really good. I think maybe time will tell. Like retrospectively, I think, because like as you say, American and British music, like it's so closely linked and interwoven now. And what's popular in the UK is often very popular in the US as well. I think it would have to be something that was like a quintessentially British genre of music, like grime or something like that, where like that would have to make it over. So like not Craig David, but like Stormzy would have to like make a would have to get a hit in America or something like that, where it would have to be like that sort of genre of music, where it's like it's very, very British. Like grime is a British genre of music.
Yeah, I'm sure people like Dave, who recently won the Brit Award. I think he's having some success in the US, and also bringing the culture, like even Stormzy, like massive
massive UK artist.
Representation of British culture. Just being like now like a global star, I guess, is part of that. I think also like general, like in terms of indie rock, I think there's a lot of like bands like Arctic Monkeys and from
Mumford and Sons.
There's a lot of crossover there, and even like the other way around, you have bands like The Killers, who are American, and they're like the British.
Mr. Brightside.
They're way more popular in the UK than I think. I mean, they're huge in the US, but I think the British people have sort of taken them in as their own because they're so popular here, and they're almost like part of British culture, even though they're like not British. So it's like, there's a lot of interchange.
Yeah, it's like invasion both ways. Like it's sort of happening both ways. But I think I guess like you could say like the big invasion has sort of happened. But like artists, like Ed Sheeran is obviously British, and he's one of the biggest artists in the world at the moment, and everyone's heard of him. As you said, like the Arctic Monkeys, Mumford and Sons, like they do make it over into America, and they do find success. But I guess now, because of the way that music is so global and it's so easy to sort of transfer, like there's less of a distance to jump, so to speak, I guess, in terms of invasion. But maybe in the next 5 years, like if we look back, because obviously we're in 2020 now, so the 2010s have only just ended. But like maybe in 5 years, when we can look back at the 2010s with a bit more hindsight and a bit more distance, we can look and say, oh, actually no, there were XYZ the amount of artists from Britain that made it to worldwide fame and over into the US, and so maybe there'll be a retrospective third invasion that we'll sort of notice later on, or it hasn't happened yet, and so like something else will come out of the UK that's just completely out there and will take over the world.
Yeah,
we haven't heard it yet.
It's interesting to track, because obviously music is consumed very much differently now than back in the 80s or the 60s.
The record sales,
So I mean, at the root of it, it will still be music being made in the UK by like people living in the UK, British or not. But because the way the music is being shared, it's like once you upload it online, it's not just going out to people in your area. It's like it's going out to the entire world all at once. Exactly. Most of the world, at least. It's just be interesting to track, I think.
Very much like this podcast, in fact, which is all over the world as well.
The British podcast invasion.
The British podcast invasion. We're slowly taking over the world. We have listeners in Hong Kong and Vietnam, France and Ireland and Germany. So thank you very much for listening over there. If you guys keep enjoying the podcast, then let us know what other albums that you'd like us to talk about. We've done Rumours by Fleetwood Mac so far. We've done Songs from the Big Chair. We've got some other really absolutely classic albums planned as well. Keep commenting on the videos, keep liking them, keep sharing them, and let us know what you think. What do you guys think of Tears for Fears? Are you guys Tears for Fear fans, or do you think it's cheesy synth pop, or are you somewhere in between? Let us know.
Yeah, Tears for Fears, or fearing the tears. No, that's really bad. All right, whatever. Publish. Thank you, Chadwick.
Thank you, Chadwick.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Sonic Bytes. If you liked what you heard, follow us on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, or Google Podcasts, or like the video on YouTube and follow the channel Leo Kelly G Music. Also, you can reach out to us in the YouTube comments or send us a message on Twitter or Instagram. We would love to hear from you, so stay tuned for another episode coming very soon.